Hello, Grant Wiley here from Worthington Publishing with another episode of Grant's Game Room. Reviews and news from around the gaming world. Just a quick update. Today is Tuesday, October 12th, 14th, something like that. I've been down with a cold the last couple days. I was going to review Mark Walker's Flying Pig Games Old School Tactical West Front, as you can tell from my voice. I've been down over the weekend with a cold, did a little bit of traveling, unfortunately, and I won't be getting to that one today. We will be doing that one either later this week, but more than likely next Tuesday, as Tuesday and Fridays are the game reviews on Tuesday, game news on Fridays. And there is some big news coming up. I've already started building my news program for Friday. Some news from around the gaming world, pretty good, exciting news. You know, we're not going to give you bad news. This isn't one of the big three news networks. But with that being said, if you're enjoying the videos and the reviews and the news, please go below, click the subscribe button, share it with a gaming friend, hit the like button. YouTube likes us having likes, so please, you know, if you're following these, you know, just keep going. If this one isn't one that interests you, let me know, and if we'll try and do more new stuff. I'm gonna do today an old Avalon Hill classic, one of my favorites, and I'm gonna tell you a backstory on this. This is Caesar, the epic Battle of Alesia. Growing up as a kid, I was probably 12, 13. One of my friends came over, and for Christmas, he'd gotten this game. Now, I had never played a war game before, but growing up, I saw my dad and my uncle playing, you know, games with cardboard pieces and hexes. You know, you remember that as a kid. So when my friend brought this over and popped it open and showed me this game on battle, because we always played Army Men, I recognized it immediately. Oh yeah, my dad and brother used to play it, and we got into it. Great game. So this is a classic. I'm going to review it, and then eventually I'll review GMT's Alesia. Fair disclosure, I am currently working on a massive game on this battle. Similar in scope to this one. The board's larger, probably a similar number of pieces, and similar playing style to this, and we're going to talk about that. This is a classic, guys. This is from 1976, designed by Dr. Robert Bradley. Originally, he had self-published this, if I'm not mistaken, from the designer notes. It was a huge map, massive number of pieces, like 1,000, 1,200 pieces. And, sorry, probably unplayable at the scale he had it. Another company bought it, sat around, didn't do anything. Avalon Hill ended up getting it. Went under development by Don Greenwood, and he and Dr. Bradley turned this into the classic it is today. If you don't have this, there are copies available on eBay and Board Game Geek. I personally own 2 copies. Any games that I really enjoy, I own multiple copies. And this is a mini monster, I would call it, you know, but we'll get into that. I'm going to show you the box here. For 1976, this was pretty cool art. You had I'm going to tell you about the battle first. If you don't know anything about the Battle of Alesia, Julius Caesar is dealing with a Gallic uprising in 52 BC against the Gallic leader Vicentrix. Vicentrix had been pursuing a scorched earth policy and retreating and harassing Caesar, not leaving Caesar supplies. There were a couple battles, a couple times, you know, Caesar tried to trap him. It didn't work out, didn't attack at Gergovia, didn't work out. Finally, Vicentrix retreats to the town of Alesia, high on a hill, walled, and he's probably got 50, 60,000 men. Caesar has an equal number. Well, Vicentrix, for some reason, decides to stop the scorched earth policy and hunkers down in this town. Julius Caesar then goes and starts building siege lines around the town to trap and lay siege to Vicentrix. Vicentrix harasses Caesar with his Gallic cavalry, but decides that he's not happy with that, so he sends all his cavalry off in search of help. Sends them across Gaul to bring help to Alesia. In the meantime, that allows Caesar to close the ring around Vicentrix in the city of Alesia. But Caesar realizes that help is on the way. So what does Caesar do? He doesn't give up the siege. Instead, he builds an outer line of siege works facing out. So what you have is Caesar and the Romans in a donut ring, in the ring around, one line facing outside against the relief force, one line facing inside against Vicentrix and Alesia. And anyway, when the relief force arrives, they attack unsuccessfully, they attack unsuccessfully, and then attack unsuccessfully finally. And during each of these attacks, Vicentrix is attacking out. So you've got inner and outer battles, inner and outer battles, inner and outer battles. The last battle was really a very near-run thing with Caesar leading, I think, 2,500 to 5,000 men into combat personally, trying to rally the men and hold the line. Very interesting situation. It's considered probably one of Caesar's greatest battles, and definitely something different. But the artwork shows the Gallic, men climbing the Roman wall with the Romans throwing their pilas and the Roman siege towers. Very exciting, particularly to a kid of 12, 13 years old who is used to playing with, typically World War II Army men during that period. One of the cool things Avalon Hill did during that time period, I don't know who came up with the idea, but they put sizzle on the side of the box. And this would get, I loved reading this as a kid. Very cool thing. Here as Caesar, you will defend a system of ramparts, forts, and awesome fortifications with 152 units representing legion, cohorts, leaders, archers, Balearic slingers, Germanic cavalry, Numidian light infantry, and missile engines. As Vicentrix, you will assault the Roman besiegers with 210 infantry and cavalry units from 46 Gallic tribes. Now, that doesn't necessarily give you the scale of things here with 152 versus 210, because the numbers vary pretty wildly in regards to this. There was a great deal of question as to how many Gallic units were actually there, how many Gallic soldiers. Of course, Caesar in his memoirs writes that, there were 250,000 Gallic soldiers against his 50,000 Romans, 40 to 50,000 Romans. Caesar's going to play this up. He wants this to sound great. Modern historians think the number's lower, although how much lower, it doesn't really matter. It was a brilliant defense by the Romans, and there's no matter how many Gallic soldiers were there, this was a great battle by the Romans. But Avalon Hill did this, and it was really cool. It used to get me so hyped up. I'd go to the store, and, man, if I didn't have the money, you make that sad face to your parents, and you read and say, this sounds really cool. Oh, this is awesome. Wish I had this. Didn't work. But this was a pretty big board at the time, too. 28 by 33. Playing time 5 hours. This was a pretty cool box. I'm going to show you the components, and then we'll go into a little bit of gameplay, and then, guys, I'm going to shut this video down, as you can hear from me hacking. The rules, black on red. Not a good color choice for people with colorblind. I'm not colorblind, but I can see where this is an issue. But they show this huge Gallic guy, looks like a grizzly, fighting this little Roman soldier, just to give you a sense of scale. Sorry. Tiny print, rules. However, to Avalon Hill and Don Greenwood's credit, this is about the length of Russian campaign. If you've ever played the Avalon Hill Russian campaign, these rules really aren't that much more complex than that. It's an I go, you go game. The Gallic player moves all their pieces. The Roman, now what was a little bit different was the Roman got defensive missile fire, kind of like reaction fire. That got a little fiddly. That is one of the things I am very much trying to emulate this game in my design. I'm not going to hide it. I love this game, and to me it was a playable monster, and I'm trying to emulate that in ours. I'm taking some of that fiddliness out. There isn't going to be 50 Roman reaction rolls from the forts. It's going to be the Roman soldiers will have a pila. They get to throw it. They're flipped. So a little bit of difference here. You're not going to get three. One of the things was the Roman player got 23 forts to set up on the board. I'm going to show you the board. And there was some strategies built around the placement of these forts, because the goal of the game is to get Forcentrix out of Alesia. That's how you win. You got 2 12-turn assault periods to get them out. You get them out, you win. You don't, you lose. Pretty simple, pretty clean. Because he was the heart of the Gallic uprising. So when he, was eliminated, so was the uprising. But the sequence of play: Gallic player moves, Roman player gets his reaction fire, Gallic player then does his assaults, and then the Roman moves and does his assaults. Very clean, very simple. A classic Avalon Hill. And I know we've gone to a lot of different things with the newer games that are very innovative. The chit draw system. My favorite system of any, hands down, chit draw. Love chit draw. However, there are games where I go, you go works, because one side was the driving side, and in this battle campaign, there is no question, the Romans were going to sit there and starve the Centrix out. The Gallic player has to move, has to be the driving factor behind this. That is one reason I think the I go, you go works so well. It forces the Gallic player to act, the Roman player to react. And you're not just sitting back on your butt reacting. You're actively fighting as a Roman player. So you've really got 5 1.25 pages of rules. A half page of optional rules here. An appendix. And then you get some actually halfway decent detailed examples. For back then, it was black and white. They threw some red in here, 2-color rules. Pretty good examples. One of my favorites, and I would read these over and over, the designer notes by Dr. Bradley. A little bit of history of the units, the terrain. And then you got basically a terrain effects chart in the back, inside of the rules. And then the CRT. And again, I saw an online poll on Board Game Geek: are CRTs dead? Well, I certainly hope not, because I'm using a CRT in my Alesia game. I think there are spots for CRTs, just like there's spots for die roll differentials in combat, and things of that nature. There's a lot of innovative systems out there for combat. One of my favorites was from Washington, Mark Kerman's We the People, which is now Washington's War. I like the original card system. It drug the game out a bit, but it created tension, or you're playing that double envelopment and you hope that your opponent doesn't have the double envelopment to combat you back. So this used the CRT. You had one for hand-to-hand combat, one for missile engine, archer, slinger, and then there's one for the outer works, and I'm going to explain that real quick, or in a minute. Game board was 3 boards, because that was the technology at the time. Not a lot of color. You had blues, browns, and blacks on here on a khaki board. And what it shows you, and I'll show you the whole board put together, are the Roman outer walls, inner walls, river, and then you got these speckles on here. And what this was prior to the battle, and you got mountain, but prior to the battle, Caesar's men had laid down a death trap for the Roman relief force. They had taken steel spikes and put them in the ground. Wooden spikes. They had put trees together with sharp branches pointed out. They had dug ditches. And it created a huge amount of trauma and death for the Gallic relief forces. They hit these walls. They had to run through these spikes, you know, men impaling their feet, and you know, if the Romans are throwing their spears, they've got their missile engines, their little Scorpios firing and things like that, and it just created a huge deal of trauma. Well, one of the things when the Gallic player, and this has locking zone of control, and for you new gamers, you may not know what locking zone of control is, but if your unit moves into a hex adjacent to my unit, he has to stop, and that's called a locking zone of control. I control the 6 hexes surrounding my unit. When you move adjacent to me, you have to stop. I'm importing a lot of this into my design because, again, it's a little bit of an homage to this. I'm changing some things that that I didn't like. But if a Gallic unit ended its move or it, you know, began combat on these outer works, and the Roman unit was and the Gallic unit was in a Roman zone of control, he had to roll, and on a 6, his units were eliminated. You get a lot of deaths that way in the game. The counters, you get Roman legions, you get 10 legions with 10 cohorts in each legion. So you got 100 Roman counters, you've got their auxiliaries and some archers and slingers. Guys, these weren't works of art. They were very functional, but in a cool way. You can't even see it. I wouldn't even hold this to the camera, but there's a oh gosh, a Roman standard, and it's got the legion number and then the cohort number. You've got 2 numbers, a strength, which is its attack and defense, and a movement number. And for most of the legions, it was 5-8. For the 10th Legion, it was 6-8, except for the very first cohort, which was 9-9, because that was Caesar's premier legion. And then you get the 23 Roman forts I was telling you about that you can set up anywhere. You get a leader piece for Caesar and a leader piece for Labienus, and what they do is they allow you, Labienus allows you to reroll one Roman die, and Caesar allows you 2 rerolls. You get the same charts off the back of the roll, the hand-to-hand combat. You get 2 assault period charts. Again, the game is played in 2 12-turn assault periods. After the first one, you get to bring 10% of your forces back and restart the game. And then you get in what's called an off-board presence indicator. And it's numbered 1 to 10, I thought. Yeah, 1 to 10. And I'm going to explain that here in a second, because you also get your off-board movement chart. What happened is, okay, the video ended there on me for a sec because my battery was low. I talked so much. Talking about the off-board movement chart, again, there's an off-board movement chart. The board is broken up into 10 areas. The Gallic player starts his first assault period off area 1, which I'm going to show you on the board. So over here in the lower left corner. Each turn he can either move in from the area he's in, or he can move to an adjacent area. He can keep this hidden from the Roman player to keep the Roman player moving and moving his defenses around possibly. It was a really cool mechanic because it makes you make a decision. Do I bring my forces in, or do I try to maneuver and find a weak spot? Time is against the Gallic player here. If he doesn't get concentrics off within the 2 12-turn assault periods, the game's over. Once the Gallic player lands 10 units and has them there at the end of, or at the start of a combat, the inner force draws one of 3 chits, and it's 1, 2, or 3. And that is how many turns from then that the inner force can actually move and attack. So if I move and get my 10 units on against the on the board, holding against the Roman wall, and I draw a 2, and it was turn 4. That means the Gallic relief force can then make, or the Gallic besieged force can then attempt to make its assault out on turn 6. Really cool mechanic that makes you make some decisions as to how when to do it. Time is against you. Is it worth it to maneuver around and maybe be set up for a good assault on the second day, or do you just try and bleed the Romans dry on the first day? The Gallic units, the inner force, the besieged force is weaker than the outer force, the relief force. It's still got some super strong units. Oh man, back's coming off this counter, it's sold. No, don't die. I'm not going to show you these pieces because they're just too hard to see at 1/2 inch and the black on the green. But they give you a little tribal name and a tribal number. You get a combat number and a movement factor. This is, I can't even read it without my glasses, a 7-6. And how they differentiated the besieged versus the relief was the relief force had their corner little triangle not colored in. The besieged force had their corner colored in. I'm going to come around to the other side of the camera, show you the board real quick. So please be patient as I move around here. I'll keep talking to entertain you. Do I not entertain you? Okay, this is the board, and you can see it is a huge board. Cool looking to me, still cool looking. You can see a hill here, that the town is built on. These brown lines with the lines running up represent hill. This is the town of Alesia. This is an important feature. The original Gallic attack came from over in this corner against here on the first day. And these are Roman camps that extended out through the lines. Cavalry camp. I think the inner camps were infantry. And the ones that protruded from the line were cavalry. But Caesar had dug a deep ditch. I believe it was 20 feet deep, 15 feet wide. And at some point, the Gallic forces attacked out this way and kept having to try to fill this thing as well as attack out. The final Gallic attack came up in the top left corner around Mount Rhea. Caesar's lines, for some reason, were unfinished up there. It's beyond me, considering he had built on hills around here, but for some reason, I guess the terrain or something would not lend itself to building entrenchments. But you can see the inner wall, and this, let's see if I can zoom in on this, guys. This here is what I'm talking about as far as the spikes and the ditch, and it just goes all around the Roman line, and it's a nightmare because you land there and you don't know until before combat whether you'll have all your men to attack, because you roll a die for each unit in the Roman zone in control. And if I've got 2 Gallic units here and 3 Roman units here, that's going to be a tough attack if one of these guys dies. You're going to be attacking at 1 to 2, 1 to 3 odds. One of the interesting things in this game is that attacking at 1 to 2 is not horrible odds. You're not going to lose any units unless you can't retreat. Stacking, the Roman player could stack 3, reflecting his better coordination, where the Gallic player could attack 2 or stack 2. Units defending in the wall or defended at double. Attacking up a hill, I believe, was double. And across a river or stream was double. And Gallic units had to stop on the river hacks and then could move off next turn. So there were some terrain issues. Not a lot, but enough to cause some headaches and make you do some thinking. Particularly on making sure you could retreat paths and things. But absolutely gorgeous board. GMT did theirs on the Great Battle of History series. And that's gorgeous too. But there's just something classic about this one. Maybe because it was my first war game that really appeals to me. I'm going to come around and give you some final thoughts. And we'll go from there. I'll cut this video short. Okay, if you're an old grognard like me, you got to have this game in your collection. I will tell you that. If you're not an old grognard and you don't have an interest, I am doing basically an updated my version of this game. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not stealing the game, but I am using ideas from the game I liked that I thought were good, and then I'm implementing my own ideas. Pretty much what a lot of designers do. You take what you like from other games and you kind of meld them into yours. This was a classic game. If you don't have it and you can get your hands on a copy, I highly recommend it. It's a great solitaire game. It's just great sitting down and moving the pieces around. It's got a very classic feel to it. There are a couple places on Board Game Geek. I saw some people had some updated homemade counters. I'm not going to put that much effort into it. It wasn't that big a problem for me. But the counters at a 1/2 inch, I just can't do 1/2 inch counters anymore with my eyes. But highly recommend this game. Highly playable. Guys, tune in Friday. I'll give you some of the news from around the gaming world. Please share, subscribe, and like this video if you enjoyed it. I know it's a little old school, but I wanted to go with something familiar since I feel so bad. But today, your job, play a game. This week, teach a game. But most of all, happy gaming.